Let me set it up this way, because I'm going to ask Chris about this. I feel some type of way about the lack of communication from Andrew Berry this week. Okay. I feel some type of way about Kevin Stefanski speaking out of both sides of his neck at the end of the game last week. How in the world, on one hand, are you saying that you're going to evaluate everything and then turn around and just instantly say Dillon Gabriel is your starting quarterback? I thought Mary Kay Cabot did a great job of pressing him last week when it came to, when are we going to get to see Shedeur Sanders? And I thought the way he handled that was a little odd. Not to be a guy that's building drama, but I'm sorry, I got to point out the obvious. When Andrew Berry is known for speaking to the media every single year of his tenure as the general manager here, and he makes the decision not to do so, you leave a lot of room for speculation, assumptions, and narratives to be created. And I think that people need to understand, man, in sports, in business, in real life, when it comes to relationships, etc. In my opinion, man, one of the key core, components to having anything healthy is healthy communication and somewhat of transparency. And by no means am I asking Kevin Stefanski to come out here and tell us your game plan and give us detail for detail of everything that's going on, right? But you listen to how he reacts to losses. And then you listen to Kenny Atkinson after we lost to the Celtics. I'll even go college level, right? The Colorado Buffalo got their butt kicked by Utah. And the way that Deion Sanders spoke after that loss, right? It just seems like no matter what sport, no matter what situation, you have head coaches that's going to come out here and be a little bit more transparent and a little bit more communicative.
Yeah.
With so many issues, so many unanswered questions going on with this football team, and for them to continuously take the approach that they take, I think it makes it easier for people to operate the way that they do, just based on the tone that you all set as an organization.
Can I say, because you use like the NBA to NFL comparison thing here, I think a lot of that is just like the culture of those sports. Like in the NBA, for whatever reason, I think there's more of a willingness from players to like talk openly about certain things. Like they'll call themselves out. They'll like Donovan, he won't call guys out necessarily publicly.
Not to cut you off, I'm talking about the coaches though.
No. But I'm just saying, like, in general, though, like, I think in the NBA, if a coach goes to the podium and says, I want him to do that more, or if a player goes to the podium and says, I want him to do that more, for whatever reason, the NBA, like, they don't take that as a slight. In the NFL, though, everything is always, like, maybe it's just, like, the aura that they give off. Like, the NFL thinks it's the league of all leagues. They think they're better than everybody, obviously. And so they're kind of like, we keep everything in-house. We don't talk about that publicly. We don't give headlines and whatever. And Kevin Stefanski very much subscribes to that belief. So I think that's why you hear him say what he says versus like Kenny Atkinson actually calling people out. I don't know. Like,
Can I say something on that, though?
I see the philosophy point on that from Stefanski where like he doesn't want to. His big thing is like he doesn't want to make headlines. And I get that.
It's not about calling people out, though. First of all, on the first part of that, I don't think it's about an NBA, NFL thing. I think it's about a personality and how you go about your business. I don't believe Kenny Atkinson is a man that's going to say anything to the media that he has not already said to those players in the locker room before he comes out and address the media.
That's fair.
And then you look at a guy like Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is a guy that gets in front of that podium and he holds his players accountable. He holds himself accountable. He gives you a little bit more. I know somebody who played for Mike Tomlin, and he has said to me personally, Mike Tomlin will never say anything on a podium that he hasn't said to a player in-house.
Yeah.
However, if he says something to a player in-house, sometimes if you give a little bit of push publicly, it'll go a long way. Nobody is asking Kevin Stefanski to come out here and throw players under the bus, to name drop, etc. But you need to give us a little bit more than we need to be better each week, or we got to improve.
Yeah, but
that's on me.
But we've also seen that way work. Like, look at Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is the classic example of I say nothing, you get nothing, and look what they did. Now, I'm not saying that we should be comparing the current Cleveland Browns to the New England Patriots during the Bill Belichick era. I'm just saying, like, you're right about Tomlin. You're right about some of these other player coaches that are out there that do get away with, like, hey, I'll say something to you in the locker room and then say it at the podium and I don't care, and they can smooth that over or whatever they need to do to make that function within their team setting. But at the same time, we've seen both philosophies work in the NFL. We've seen coaches who aren't afraid to do what Mike Tomlin does, and it worked. We've seen coaches who do the Bill Belichick mentality, which is what Kevin Stefanski does, and it produced 6 Super Bowls. So I can understand the standpoint there from Stefanski doing it that way. Here's what I would say. I'm not trying to defend them because listen, I've said this a dozen times already. I think that Kevin Stefanski, like, they don't do themselves a lot of favors by not saying a lot of things. And I do think, like, Kevin just going up there and saying the same thing, like, gets very old when you're losing. It doesn't help. What I'll say on the Andrew Berry piece of this is, yes, you're right. It looks weird that he's done this every year except for this year. But at the same time, I kind of get where he's coming from too, because it's not required, by the way. Like, there's no like agreement with the players, the writers, the Football Writers of America that like the GM has to speak during the bye week. And so I understand where it's like a double-edged sword for him. If he talks, everyone's just going to be like, well, you didn't give us enough. You didn't say this. You didn't say that. That wasn't a sufficient answer. If he doesn't talk, people are going to be like, well, where's the accountability? I would prefer that he talks because he just made 2 trades 2 weeks ago. And I do think it's kind of unfair that Kevin Stefanski has to answer for everything. But at the same time, I do understand where, like, from an organizational standpoint, it is kind of like a lose-lose in that regard.
I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders don't have his issues, right? And I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders don't, have things that he need to work on. But I've just noticed lately that people are painting this picture that it's going to be much worse than what we're seeing right now from Dillon Gabriel if he got the opportunity. And I think everybody just keep coming back to the same point of, well, he drifts in the pocket. Like, it seems like that's at this point in the process, the only thing that you can fall on is, well, he drifts in the pocket.
Yeah.
I also don't believe that this wide receiving core is overall that bad to the point to where you're making it seem like that's the reason why Dillon Gabriel can't perform.
Oh, we went right there.
So, and this is what I mean by that. So this is what I mean by that, right? I am not by any means saying that the Cleveland Browns have a good wide receiver room.
Right.
What I'm saying is this wide receiver room is better than what people think. The problem is they are underperforming. Cedric Tillman has been hurt, but at the end of last season, before he got hurt, people was really, really high on Cedric Tillman. Jerry Jeudy had drop issues last year. That's a fact, right? He still was a 1,000-yard wide receiver, and people looked at Jerry Jeudy as we had a solidified number 1, maybe number 2 wide receiver. He, too, has underperformed. But he, too, has also been utilized in a way that's been different from last year. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I believe that Jerry Jeudy played in the slot 35% of his snaps last season. He's been in the slot wide receiver position 16% of those snaps this season. Okay?
I think that's a necessity thing.
So the point I'm making is I don't think that the pass catchers in totality, if you want to include the tight ends as well, is that bad to where the point that's why we're not getting quality production or even like just average production from the quarterback position. I do think that inserting a Shedeur Sanders will boost morale. And I think that I think that the energy behind that, I'm curious to see what the production and what the results will be. Like he said, like Chris said, the talent on the roster is what the talent on the roster is.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes because the situation is so bad, we're quick to say things like, well, the Browns got the worst wide receiver room in the NFL. And I think that the Browns wide receiver room, though they're not good, they have underperformed. And it makes them look worse than what they are. You follow what I'm saying? Because can anybody, like, do you, like me and you talked about it. What can we compare it to first? You want to go with the Titans?
Well, yeah, I mean, I literally, as we were talking about this during the break, I started pulling up depth charts here. So one of the first ones I threw out was Miami. And I said, without Tyreek Hill, because obviously at the beginning of the season they had Tyreek Hill. That is what it is. I basically asked you, do you think Jalen Waddle's better than Jerry Jeudy? Because I was like, their wide receiver room is garbage outside of Jalen Waddle, and they don't have a good tight end really either. I mean, you could make the case that when he was still healthy, that what's his name was having like a bounce back season. How am I drawing up? Darren Waller. Yeah. But other than that, like their pass catchers aren't that great right now. But I still would say probably overall you might say. I mean, I don't know. Do you think Jalen Waddle or who would you take if you had to draft right now? First pick, you can pick either Jalen Waddle or Jerry Jeudy. Who are you taking?
That's a really, really good question. I think I would go with Jalen Waddle just because of that speed factor.
Yeah, he's definitely fast.
I think that speed factor is the
Jerry
separator
isn't
between
really
the
like
two.
A separation guy.
Yeah, he's more of a route runner. But like,
yeah.
I just think that like sometimes I feel like, in my opinion, We need to scale back from when we say, okay, this is the worst wide receiving core like ever to be seen. And I just feel like if we had a little bit better quarterback play, if the wide receivers did a better job of holding on to the ball, if everyone collectively did their job a little bit better, I think we'll be changing the tune, because a lot of these guys were here last year. Jerry Jeudy was here last year. Cedric Tillman was hurt on and off last year.
Yeah.
He should be back after the bye. Jamari Thrash was here last year. David Njoku, he's not a wide receiver by position, but based on this offense and how it was built, he's part of the pass catching room. He was here last year. So the new additions is what? Harold Fanning? And who else?
That's the biggest one. I mean, Jamari Thrash is getting a bigger role this year for sure. I mean,
but he was here last year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but he wasn't as involved last year.
But you get my point. So, like, the temperature and the tone about this wide receiver room was not this bad last year, even though we thought it wasn't that great. The bigger issue is that group is underperforming to a level that is totally unacceptable.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, I don't know, I kind of view this a little bit differently. Now, in the grand scheme of things, like, if we're going to compare wide receiver rooms, I think my general feeling is like the Titans probably do have the worst one in football. I think the Raiders have a case for one of the worst ones in football. If you're lumping in other pass catchers, Brock Bowers probably puts them over the top because Brock Bowers is better. But if I'm taking like Jacoby Myers or Jerry Jeudy, I probably like Jerry Jeudy a little bit better.
Saints got Chris Olave.
Saints got Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who I think is a pretty good player. Like, there's just pretty good. I still think the Browns. To me, though, like, here's the thing. It doesn't even matter, like, if we want to comp, like, is theirs the worst in this group's or whatever. They're probably bottom three in terms of wide receiver rooms right now.
I agree with that.
And that doesn't have to be strictly because, like, Jerry's having a bad season. It can just be, like, collectively their talent is just not on par with other players. But you bring up, like, they're underperforming. Yeah, but what else do we have to go off of at this point to, like, judge them? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can say they're underperforming, and we can say, like, yeah, they've had some bad injuries and things, but that's all part of the context right now of whether or not the receiver room is good or not. It's the same thing, like, I kind of was laughing, like, you kind of sounded like Kevin Stefanski, where it's like, they just got to play better. That's what Kevin's telling us every game, but nothing changes. Like, at some point, what you're showing us on tape every week is who you are. So for me, I do think they have a really bad wide receiver room, but as it relates to Shedeur, my big thing with this conversation is, yes, wide receiver room isn't good, at least right now. Offensive line, been an issue all season. They struggle to protect any quarterback that's back there. They couldn't protect Flacco very well. They're not protecting Dillon very well. They're not necessarily run blocking very well. A lot of what you see Quinshon Judkins having success with is like he kind of creates it on his own, right? He finds a small hole and then like breaks a couple tackles and goes. So there's a lot of issues with this offense. Yes. I don't know that any quarterback would succeed in this, but what I will say, and I wrote about this actually this week, if you go back to college, and I understand that the Browns loved the fact that Dillon had 6 years of college experience, and I do think experience matters. Like, the more snaps you have, that stuff matters to NFL teams, especially in terms of like what you've seen, what you've done. But I also think Dillon played in a lot on teams that had a lot better situations around him than Shedeur did. Shedeur went to Colorado, and it was kind of like a makeshift roster, right? It was like a little bit of Deion's guys, a little bit of guys that were already there, a little bit of guys he brought in through the transfer portal and things. And he built this team that took the world by storm. They started that 1 year, like, 3-0, 4-0, whatever it was. And then they end up winning like 7-8 games, and everyone's impressed because Colorado was so bad. And he did that behind one of the worst offensive lines probably in college football, with a lot of chaos going on. In some respects, that is the thing that you can point to and say, this is why he does the drift in the pocket thing, because he had a bad offensive line in front of him. And I hope that that's something that the Browns have tried to coach out of him.
You've been making this point since what, April?
Right. I hope that that's something the Browns have tried to coach out of him at this point. And it might still be there. There might still be some remnants of that. But I'll tell you, like, if you're trying to tell me which quarterback might be better suited to run this offense with all the issues they have, with Kevin Stefanski going to the podium after games and saying, we just got to be better, because he knows there's no easy fix. Like Chris alluded to, they're not fixing the offensive line in the season. They're not fixing the receiving core in the season, unless maybe they make a trade next week. But either way, like, there's no quick fixes for those things. So who's better equipped to handle that? Sure, Dillon has a lot of experience from college. But Shedeur, he operated in chaos and was still one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football last year, still put up awesome numbers, and has proven to you that, like, when things go awry, he can make plays. Yes, the drift in the pocket thing, you're not going to get away with that in the NFL, no doubt. he hopefully can correct those things and he can learn as he goes. But I do have questions now at this point about like if this offense, because it is a debacle right now and because it's a mess right now, if Shedeur is actually better suited to run it just because of the experiences that he's had. So I'm as curious as anybody to see it. I get why they're sticking with Dillon, the 4-game sample size and all that. Like you can't.
You know why I'm smiling at you? You just told our whole audience that you believe Shedeur Sanders makes everybody on his offense better. That's what you just said.
That's all to say. Like, to get back to the main point here, that's all to say. Like, we're on the same page with this. Yeah. Like, I think there's a way where the offense shows maybe a little bit more life. Again, I get why they're sticking with Dillon, and because again, I said it with Chris. If Shedeur started first and he only got in 4 games, I'd be banging the drum like, you can't evaluate a guy in 4 games. So I got to be fair to Dillon in that regard too, and say, okay, he deserves some time here. And I like what Chris had to say. He doesn't know if it's week to week. I kind of feel like it's week to week, but I could see a world where they just are like, let's get through the next couple games before we make a switch and talk about it. But at the same time, I think you're right. Like, to me, I have questions and I have thoughts on maybe this offense will be better suited for Shedeur because he's seen that chaos. He's seen those struggles, and he still found a way to produce
and
it.
Like I said, don't get me wrong. I am not by no means trying to make it seem like the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room is anything that's above average, or good, or anything like that. I'm just asking this hypothetical question like, okay, if you think the wide receivers suck, did you come into the 2025 season saying Jerry Jeudy sucks? Did you come into the season saying Cedric Tillman sucks?
I was riding the Jerry Jeudy train. I know you were. Conductor of
like,
the Jerry
and I can remember, train. Like, we talked to Ashley Bastock once, and she was saying how Jamari Thrash she thought had the best training camp.
Didn't you and I argue if he was a top 10 wide receiver?
Yeah, we did.
15? And you said he was like 20, and I said he was 15.
Yeah, so it's like, I get it because everybody has underperformed, but I'm just curious if people feel that way.